Abounding life, abounding harvest. John 15 verse 16, Jesus was speaking and he said, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you." You did not choose me. I chose you and appointed you. Some things, some truths jump out from this passage of scripture, this word that Jesus spoke. There's something I would say before I get to the things that dropped in my heart first. The fact that when Jesus says, "You did not choose me, I chose you," it means that for us, harvest is not accidental. God chose you specifically to produce certain things in your life. So there is no accident about what your life should produce. The skill, the gifts, the opportunities that God provides for each person is tailored to why he chose you. You cannot harvest what you were not chosen for. I'll restate it again. You cannot harvest what you were not chosen for. One of the greatest mistakes that a man can make is to use another person's life as a measure for their life. You don't know what they were chosen for. If you start to compare yourself to somebody else, you will miss it because you will not harvest what God did not choose you for. It says, you did not choose me, I chose you. In essence, also, it means you are not in control. I am in control. Because it is the one who chooses that is in control. But in addition to those things, we should also understand that you cannot have a harvest where there is no fruitfulness. It says, I chose you to bear fruit. It is fruit that gives us a season for harvest. You don't harvest emptiness. So before you can harvest, you must see evidence. Because a tree somewhere does not mean that if you say it is time for mango and you go to a tree that is mango tree and there's nothing there, will you harvest the tree? The fruit is evidence. The fruit is proof. Another truth I would like to drop with our hearts this morning is the fact that harvest is not just a command, it is an appointment. It said, I have appointed you to bear fruit. In the sense, it is saying, I have empowered you to bear fruit. Or I am empowering you to bear fruit. But it's also saying there is a time when you must bear fruit. Let me also add, an abounding harvest in the sight of God is a lasting harvest. He said that your fruit should remain. The word there, remain, speaks to permanence. That what you produce should last. It should be something that is sustainable, to use a more modern word. The harvest that God expects is not a harvest that is temporary. It's a harvest that lasts. It says that your fruit shall remain. So for God, an abounding harvest is not just an increasing harvest. It is a lasting harvest. Because many times when we talk about abounding, our mind goes to the word increase. And it's not wrong. But if you look at this, he said that his purpose is that the fruit should remain. So for God, an abounding harvest is a lasting harvest. Final truth I'd like to pick out of this verse for us this morning. And then we'll begin to unpack what God is saying. It's that last phrase. It says that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. This is a truth a lot of times we do not appreciate. That what you produce determines what you can ask for. Let me rephrase it. The harvest in your life determines what you can ask for. He says, I chose you that you may bear fruit and that your fruit may remain, so that whatever you ask for, or whatever you ask my Father for, you can get. There is a harvest that qualifies you to ask for more. There's something that you used to say, that how you treated the last one will tell me whether I should give you another one. What you did with the last thing I gave you will either disqualify you or qualify you for another one. I have given something to someone before, and when I gave the person said, thank you very much. I am a believer that when you give somebody something, it belongs to the person, and they can do whatever they like with it. I agree. I do not disagree. But there are some things that when you do, the way you treat what I give you also means I will decide whether next time I should give you or not. And I gave the person something, and the person decided to sell it. Yeah, I told the person, no. I said, this is the last time I'm giving you something. Because how you treated this thing tells me the kind of mind you have. There are people that don't know how to multiply harvest. So why should I give you more if you cannot multiply the harvest that you received? But from this passage also it becomes clear one thing Jesus established in this chapter 15 for the disciples, which is what I would like us to really consider this morning, is that before you can get a harvest, you must settle the question of what is generating the fruit. It is not every fruit that is right for you. So before I talk about harvest, before I say I want to harvest, the question is, what is producing the fruit? And I'm sure we all agree that fruits don't produce themselves. It is something that produces a fruit. And it is what produces a fruit that tells you the kind of fruit that you will get. It's a popular saying that they say that you cannot sow cocoyam to reap cassava. Abi? And Jesus was making that clear to his disciples. Let's go back to the beginning of this. John chapter 15. I'd like us to look at verse 4 just to establish the fact that it is what you are joined to that determines what you can produce. It says, abide in me and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide to me. In essence, if you are not joined to the vine, you can produce the fruit of the vine. It is the tree that determines, in a sense, what is produced. It is the seed that determines what is produced. Can you go to Luke chapter 6 verse 45? Luke chapter 6 verse 45. Luke 6:45. It's a principle of harvest that I think we need to understand also. Luke 6:45 says, a good man out of the good treasures of his heart brings forth good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks. What is Luke saying to us? The truth of harvest is that harvest starts with you. It is what you produce that becomes harvest for you. Too many times you are looking for harvest outside of you. Jesus said, it is what is inside of you that comes out. And I'm sure we understand this, what he's saying, because many times they'll say there's power in the tongue, there's power in the tongue. So it also means, in essence, that you can use your tongue to reap. So if you don't have the right things inside of you, you will reap the wrong things. In essence, you cannot see on the outside what you have not produced on the inside. And that's why, for an abounding harvest, you must have an abounding life. Because our lives are the starting point of every harvest that we seek. I don't know if you've ever thought about yourself like this, but sometimes I do. I think about myself like this. Just to think about my relationship with God. And I see that, I think myself, I said, everything God has put in me is an investment. And before God will invest more in me, he asks himself, was the last investment worth it? Because too many times people are asking God to add more, but they've not asked themselves, the last one, was it worth it? What did I do with the last one? The last time I asked God for 1,000 naira and he gave me, what did I use it for? Because sometimes, and they'll say, Pastor is talking about money, but if I don't talk about money, if I say I should pray for money now, you will answer amen. So let me talk about money. Abi? Because when you ask God for 1,000 naira and he gives you, what does God expect from that 1,000 naira? What does God expect? A tithe. A tithe. Did you say so? A tithe. So he expects a tithe as the minimum. So let's start with the minimum. So you got the 1,000 naira. Did you give the tithe? So next time when you are asking for 2,000 naira, why should he answer you? I'm not saying God will not answer you. He will answer you. God is a merciful God. He's not like me. But question, why should he answer you? There is no abounding harvest without an abounding life. Because like we said, your harvest is proof of who you are joined to. It is proof of what you are joined to. In verse 7 of that chapter 15, Jesus said to them in verse 7, he says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, you will ask what you desire and it shall be done for you. It is proof. So we have established that an abounding life is a requirement for an abounding harvest. And we know that our actions are seed. There is no harvest without a seed. And in John chapter 15, Jesus provides certain seeds and certain actions that he expects of us as his children for our lives to abound. I'd like us to turn to verse 9. John 15 verse 9. That's the first truth we're going to learn. How does my life abound? John 15 verse 9, it says, as the Father loved me, I also have loved you. Abide in my love. An abounding life is a life that is lived from the love of God. Or to be more precise, from God's kind of love. I was reading that scripture, that it said, abide in my love. I know a lot of times when we read it, it talks like saying, okay, abide in love, in my love, the love I'm showing for you. But I was reading again, I said, what of this? Jesus was also trying to say, abide in the kind of love that I have. Live out the kind of love that I give. An abounding life is a life of love. Not love of the bedroom, and not love of money. It is God's kind of love. I'm sure a lot of us by now, when you hear God's kind of love, you already know the Greek for it. Abi? There are so many Greek ministers now. So what is the Greek for love? Agape. Yeah. Truth is, God's kind of love is man's kind of love. When you study the word agape, there's one word that speaks of agape, and I just want to speak on that word this morning, because there are many words that you can use to describe it. But one word that describes agape is generosity. So when God says we should live out his kind of love, he's saying our life should be a generous life. Now, so if I say that one to people, now start thinking, give all my money away. Just calm down first. Generosity does not only mean giving money. I've come to believe that there are 3 relationships that a person needs to maintain on earth, and if you don't maintain the balance correctly, your life will run into trouble. You must maintain your relationship with God correctly. You must maintain your relationship with people correctly. You must maintain your relationship with yourself correctly. If your relationship with God is faulty, it will affect every other relationship you have. If your relationship with people is faulty, it will affect every relationship in your life. If your relationship with yourself is faulty, it will affect every relationship. there is a balance that requires that those three relationships are correctly maintained. Some of us, you don't know how to be generous to yourself. Yes. Be generous to yourself. Love yourself. Let's start with something that is very common to all of us. If you cannot forgive yourself, you are not generous to yourself. Because part of God's generosity to you is forgiveness. And sometimes the reason why some of us, our lives, we are not seeing harvest is because you have not forgiven yourself for something you did many years ago. And this is the thing about not forgiving yourself. It means you are also stuck the last place where something happened to you. So you are praying for an abounding harvest, but your life is not increasing because the only measure you use to measure yourself is the last place you failed. Can you imagine a student who fails an exam and then they say there is a receipt and you say, no, I just want to sit down in this place and feel sorry for myself. I feel so bad that I failed this exam. I just want to sit here. Just leave me alone. So that WAEC will know how sorry I am. So that my parents will know how. All this parents, I had my parents saying that their child passed WAEC. I've been a pass exam. Anyone, God bless you. I can just imagine if the child failed the exam. The child said, Mommy, I just want to sit down here. I will sit down here until I grow old so that you will know I'm very sorry.